Okay, so here's the deal. You probably see him every morning, and he kind of looks Filipino, but I'm sure you're guessing, trying to place him if he is Filipino. Comes from a network, although that has a lot of has the most number of Filipinos. Yes, hello and welcome.
We definitely have the most, I should say.
Hello and welcome to Kababayan, LA, Bobby DeCastro. I'm almost tempted to say Bobby DTV because that's your Twitter.
That's my Twitter, account. Bobby DTV, yeah. And actually, that's kind of a nickname that they've given me, and no matter what story I do,
so
that's
Bobby
something
D.
That they've
and see that's okay. That will be my first question. The stories that you do, it's so varied. So you do sports, you do entertainment, you do. Do you have a particular favorite?
You know what? That's one benefit of working on a show like Good Day LA and like Fox 11 is I get to do so many different things.
Right.
And you kind of never get bored.
But are there ever
do crime stories? Like there's one day I might be doing a workout or a fun feature segment, and then
you're covering the store.
All of a sudden they say breakdown.
Right.
Go off and there's a fire somewhere.
Really?
And you'll cover that fire. So everything's real instantaneous. And we do everything off the cuff.
And you sound like you love what you're doing.
Yeah, you know what? It's always kind of what I wanted to do. And when I was a kid, I thought I wanted to be a reporter. I watched the news religiously. My parents were appointment viewers, so every 10 o'clock at night they'd watch the news, and we sat and we all watched with them. So, and then when I was, in my small town, I grew up in South Carolina. When I would see the newscasters out and about, I thought that's kind of what I want to do. So I'm sort of in a weird way like living the dream.
Right. Know? Well, South Carolina, that's not a very Filipino. It's not a very Filipino town. City.
Yeah, Charleston is a huge Filipino community. There's a bigger Filipino community because of the naval base that's there. But I grew up in Columbia, which is the capital. And at the time, growing up in the 80s.
As a Filipino, how is it like? How you look different. You don't look like your average white American guy.
Yeah.
But then also at the same time, that in connection to my other question, which is breaking into mainstream media.
Yeah.
What kind of opportunities are out there for people of color?
Well, your first question, just growing up in South Carolina, it was very different. Although my parents always just taught us to be ourselves, and I think they always just emphasized education and doing as much as we can do, so we always felt like we were part of the community. But you always recognize that, in South Carolina at the time, you were either white, you're black. There weren't even many Hispanics at the time that I was really growing up, at least in my high school in the suburb that I was living in.
Was that a good thing or a bad thing, that you kind of stand out or stood out?
I think both.
Yeah.
There were some positives to it. So everybody knew who we were, the DeCastros. I had 4 brothers, so there were 4 of us. I have 4 brothers, so there was 5 of us growing up together.
A basketball team.
That's what everybody says.
The first 5.
Boy,
where are your parents? Where are your parents from?
The Philippines.
Okay. Let's get that out of the way. Actually, John is our first caller of the day, and he wants to talk to you, Bob.
Hey, John.
Hi, good afternoon, Bob and Janelle. I just want to ask, you're a Filipino. Do you consider yourself more Filipino or Filipino-American? And what inspired you to be more of a newscaster? And I enjoy watching you on the news. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. That's very nice. Boy, as I've grown up later in life, I've identified more with being Filipino. I think growing up, because we didn't really have sort of a Filipino community in Columbia, South Carolina, I didn't really identify with being Filipino, but as I grew up, you see the values that your parents instilled in us, how humble Filipinos are, how helpful they are. I was in the Navy as well, and everywhere I would go around the world, people would say, they're Filipino.
Yes, and there's an instant connection.
Instant connection, and they would always say the same thing. They are the nicest, most hardworking people. And I think it's sort of a cliche, but it's true.
Right,
And everywhere I've gone in my career, I've lived in many, many different cities. The Filipino community has embraced me. So I always felt like I had a family away from home.
Right. So how much are you embracing the Filipino community, the Filipino values, Filipino food. I'm sure that there's no problem with that. We'll be talking about that when we return on Kababayan LA. Don't go away.